How many are in the house today?
Questions? 3.
That's it? Oh, okay, good. Yeah. Just fire. Lots of questions to fire then. How many are in the house today?
Oh, we're not muted here. Questions? 3.
That's it? Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. Just... All right, here we
go. The radical.
Whoops.
Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Wednesday. I should know because tomorrow I'm flying to Austin to be at Ocon. It should be a lot of fun. Let's see. I need to promote Debbie to a panelist, I think. Promote to panelist. It's not promoted. Oh, there you are. Now Debbie's promoted. Okay. So I will be at Ocon. Hopefully I'll see many of you there. I'm probably 3 days behind on my prep for my talk at Ocon. So if anybody knows how to slow time down or slow time down, yes, or add an extra day between Friday and Saturday, that would be perfect because hell, I need it. Anyway, it should be, it's going to be a fun event after, you know, the thing with Ocon is I try to get the first speaking slot so I can get out of the way, done, finished, and then I can enjoy the rest of the conference without thinking about it. It's the only place where I, usually I'm giving a new talk. Usually it's completely new material. And the audience is a little bit more, what would you call them? Knowledgeable than most of my audience. Just some of the people in the audience know more than I do sometimes about the topic I'm talking about. So it's the only one that requires a lot of prep and that stresses me out a little bit on. So I'm looking forward to getting it over with. This one will be fun because it's a talk about OPA, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff. So there'll be a tribute to Leonard, which will be a lot of fun to do. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay, we've got our Q&A, AMA, Super Chat, $25 supporter, all of that good stuff. I think Allie's in the house. So yes, Allie's there. So she's still responsible for making sure the Super Chat comes through and that you guys ask questions. Jonathan, thank you. Thanks for the support. You know, Jonathan's starting a 1.99 day. You know, you guys might want to participate in the $1.99 day. I do want to say something about the news, and really the only thing in the news right now, other than Congress is trying to bankrupt the country again, but there's nothing new there. The only thing in the news is the continuation of the complete capitulation of the United States of America to the Taliban. The Biden administration has basically handed over, it's basically letting the Taliban dictate the terms. It's Michael, thank you. Really appreciate that. Thanks for all your support and thank you for this. Yesterday, the Taliban basically said, we're not going to allow any Afghans to leave Afghanistan. It's our country. We're not going to let them leave. Go to hell, Americans. We'll let the Americans go, but only until August 31st. After August 31st, everybody's gone. We don't want anybody here. And Biden basically gave a talk after this Taliban announcement. And the talk was postponed. He was supposed to do a press conference at 2 and then at 3 and then at 4. So people thought, ooh, they're reevaluating their position. And he came out and said, yeah, we'll do what the Taliban wants. He didn't say it that way, but that's basically what he said. We're going to get out of there August 31st. There's still 1,500 Americans there. And it's worth pointing out that as we speak, incredibly courageous special forces teams and, helicopter pilots and others CIA agents are going into various neighborhoods in Kabul and in other places in Afghanistan and finding ways to smuggle Americans out of there and to the airports and get them on planes and get them back home. So there's some really brave Americans out there doing the work that they're supposed to do, which is to protect American lives. And the enemy here is Washington. The enemy here is our own administration. The pathetic, groveling nature of the response to this whole thing is just being, I guess it's just what you'd expect. It's not a surprise because nothing here is new or different than I think other administrations would have handled this. Biden just seems clueless. And I think it's pure politics. He's figured that the American people are out of Afghanistan and they don't care what happens. Of course, imagine if the United States leaves August 31st and 500 Americans are left on the ground and now are hostages of the Taliban, and what the Taliban could do to them, what the Taliban could extract from the United States in exchange for them. I mean, there's no end to the disaster that this could lead to. And let me just say, this is the consequence of treating the Taliban or treating any evil administration out there, whether it's the North Koreans or the Iranians or the Taliban, as partners of negotiation, partners to negotiate with. And all these administrations we've seen, but particularly Trump and Biden, have treated the Taliban as if they're just another group that we need to negotiate with and treat with respect and treat as if they have a legitimacy. I refer you all to the Jocko video that I put up the other day. That's how a president should have responded, but no American president will respond that way. It's just not. Unfortunately, the American people don't have the moral backbone to handle a president like that, which is sad. Michael says a Canadian member of cabinet addressed the Taliban on a parliamentary call and referred to them as brothers. Yes. I mean, that is truly scary. If you think about who the Taliban are, religious fanatics, complete and utter mystics, violent, anti-everything we in the West stand for. Anti-reason, anti-individualism, anti-equal protection of the law, anti-individual rights, anti-capitalism, anti-everything we stand for. And yet you're seeing that from Canadian members of cabinet. You're seeing that from some on the American left who's supposed to be huge on women's rights, but you're also seeing it on the American right. It seems like on the right, what you're seeing is people kind of a little jealous that the Taliban can be kind of principled and manly. There's this whole thing of the Taliban know what men are. Men are men, and you're seeing that from people like on the alt-right. You're seeing it, even from people who should know a lot better. It's just disgusting. It's just disgusting. These people are true believers. They have principles. By the way, the Taliban today announced that women who typically go to work shouldn't go to work right now because the fighters who are occupying the various cities wouldn't know how to handle these women on their way to work and might abuse them. So it's better that the women just stay home. Don't send a message to fighters to stop harassing women. No. Let's lock the women up so that they don't. I mean, this is religion over and over again. Women are the source of temptation. I did a whole show on this when that Atlanta shooting happened, when that guy shot up the massage parlors in Atlanta, and you looked into kind of the evangelical ideology came from, and that it was the same in Islam, the same in Judaism, the same in evangelical in some forms of Christianity. Women are a source of temptation. Men are irrational and cannot resist, and therefore, the source of the problem is women because they tempt men. And if they only wore very, very, if they wore burqas or if they just better stayed home, then men wouldn't be tempted. It wouldn't do what's in their nature to do, which is rape and pillage and abuse. So just disgusting at the bottom, at the bottom of the heap of ideas and ideologies and belief systems. It's just horrible. All right, that's the news. I was interviewed today on television on a TV show that's produced in London, but airs in Nigeria. And they wanted to know what I thought of what was going on in Afghanistan. I've done a few episodes for them. They seem to like me and they keep coming back. And the last question was about, the decline of America. And yeah, I mean, I think what the financial crisis did was it basically eliminated America from kind of the economy to emulate. And now I think with what's happening in Afghanistan, we're now just another loser country. There's just nothing special about us. There's nothing to emulate. There's nothing to look up to. It's from an international perspective. I feel bad for all the people who were inspired by America, strove to come here, thought that there was the good guys in the world and America represented it. And now that heroic vision is no longer there. Valdrin is asking, are they British in Nigeria? No, but the Nigerians speak English. It was a British colony. So the Nigerians generally speak English. Well-educated Nigerians are very well-educated. I've said this before, but the most educated immigrants to the United States, the most educated nationality in the United States today are Nigerians. They're very well-educated and English speakers in Nigeria. So they have TV in English. And a lot of Nigerians in London. I met a number of them, again, super intelligent, super ambitious, super smart, and they have great English. They have really, really good kind of the King's English. Kind of. All right, let's go to our panelist, Nick. You're up.
Am I muted or unmuted? Oh, okay. Muted. Okay. All right. If you don't mind, I wanted to continue. I had a few questions from our little special seminar we did a few days ago.
On capitalism.
Yeah, on capitalism, now that it's fresh, before it becomes stale. Okay, so let's start with what a proper. No, I wanted to tie what a proper definition of capitalism with the historical attacks on capitalism. Because I think you got to establish what a proper definition of capitalism is. Now, any proper definition, from what I understood, has a genus and a differentia that differentiates it, right? The social system, and what differentiates capitalism from the other social system, because you have to establish that. And you also have to establish what it is not. So, I mean, that's your first order of business, because they're going to try to, whoever you're interacting with, are going to try to define capitalism in terms of Marxist terms. So you have to head them off at the pass in terms of, not letting them define what capitalism is. I mean,
so you differentiate capitalism or in really in the formal definition in two ways. One is it's a social political system. Okay, how's it? There are lots of social political systems. What makes this one unique? It's where the sole purpose of the government is the protection of individual rights, primarily property rights, and where all property is privately owned.
What about the moral aspect?
The moral aspect is not in the definition.
Okay,
it's because capitalism, politics stands on a morality. It depends on a morality. It's grounded in a morality, and I would even argue it incentivizes a particular morality. I think statism incentivizes various forms of altruism, and capitalism incentivizes self-interest. But that's not in the definition. It's not in the descriptor. That's the kind of the foundation. It's how you argue. Maybe you argue for it. It's in the philosophical foundations of it.
Now, how do your opponents try to redefine capitalism to what it is not?
What the opponents always do is they never define, right? Opponents, who defines anything these days? So what the opponents do is they say, capitalism is markets. We have markets today, therefore that's capitalism. Or and then what's his name? The guy I'm debating at University of Pennsylvania, whose name I forgot now. He says capitalism is markets. We've always had markets. Therefore, capitalism has been the system we've always had. So he says, yeah, you guys say communism killed 100 million. But then he says he blames the 30-year war, the 100-year war, the wars of, Roman conquest, all are blamed on capitalism because there were markets then. So that's capitalism. So Richard Wolff, thank you. They don't define. They just throw something out there without differentiate, without identifying it, what it is, how it's responsible, causal relationships. None of that is interesting to them. They just sweep it aside. And look, that's how the term is used today. We're all, the United States is capitalist. Everybody thinks so. Everybody believes that. And because it has markets and because it redistributes less wealth, it's capitalist. And Denmark is socialist because they redistribute more. Again, they don't define socialism. They're not interested in defining socialism, which is technically a system in which the state owns the means of production. They don't want to define that because they want to pretend that the state won't own the means of production because they know that didn't work. So now they have all the socialists talk about co-ops. The workers will own the means of production. Yeah, which means the state, because the workers have to have political power in order to sustain that system, right? So
is it useful to contrast a proper definition of capitalism with a proper definition of socialism, so everyone out there who has a superficial definition clearly understands what we're talking about?
Yes, and you have to repeat it more than once because it doesn't sink in. So you have to say, not only is it the system where the government only protects individual rights, it's the separation of state from economics, just to hammer the point home. It's where the state has no involvement in economics. And then you say, so what we have today is not capitalism because we have a lot of intervention in the economy. It doesn't stop the other side from continuing to blame everything they want to on that exists today on capitalism. So it doesn't fix the problem, but at least in the audience's mind, there's now a clear alternative.
Because they want to piggyback all the ills of history, whether it's like you said, child slavery, or you get a guy, a little punk like Bosch, who tries to equate feudalism with capitalism, just ridiculous. World War I, World War II, famines, name it.
Everything is caused by capitalism.
Capitalism, which is, you got to, which is.
And of course, it's the opposite of the truth because capitalism led to the longest period of peace, after Napoleonic Wars. And of course, after World War II is a period of relative peace among those countries that were more free market oriented than the rest. So, it's the longest period of peace in Europe. Partially because there's a stalemate with the Russians, but partially because with the Soviets, but partially because Germany and France are not fighting, right? And Germany and France are not fighting to a large extent because they're both relatively free countries.
The McDonald's factor.
What's that?
The McDonald's factor.
The McDonald's, yeah. I mean, trade freedom. Countries that trade with each other and the free don't tend to go to war. It's not that they never go to war and they can change quickly, like Germany did before World War II, but they don't tend to go to war. Too much interdependence, if you will.
Thank you for the response. But by the way, did you get any feedback from Jocko Willink himself? It'd be nice if you got him the papers.
I sent him the thing. I tweeted him. I got no response. No.
Because he's a good link to Joe Rogan because they're best of friends. But it doesn't sound like he's an intellectual. He's more of a can-do guy. But that's what it is. What it is.
It is what it is, and he's better than the intellectuals. So I'll take him over the intellectuals any day.
No, he's ferocious.
Yep. Adam, I don't think I got an email from you with questions.
You didn't, because I was on the way to Austin and you see me from my Austin hotel room.
Oh, wonderful. Good for you.
So number one, you said that you opposed vaccine mandates. Now, I think that it is an initiation of force to subject another person to an objectively demonstrable risk of death or serious harm. And I don't think you would disagree with that, right?
Yeah.
And the exact degree has to be set by the legislature. That's one of the functions of the legislature.
Yeah.
Infecting another person with a contagious disease or risking infecting another person with a contagious disease falls into that category. Would you agree with that?
It depends on the severity of the contagious disease, but yes. So yes,
well,
the
legislature has already defined the degree of risk that is acceptable versus the degree of risk that's criminal.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
So at that point, we have to use the science, and an epidemiologist would need to calculate the exact degree of risk of death or severe harm posed by a person who is contagious with any particular disease. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I mean, I don't know how you would actually put that into play, probabilities, because there's so many caveats, right? Because it depends on the risk of death or the risk of severe disease is clearly linked to you as the person who gets a disease's condition as well.
Right. So there's a population, and an epidemiologist knows the characteristics of the
on average
population, and neither of us is in a position to do that calculation, but I get Amish does those calculations all the time.
Yes.
Now, so if the disease affects enough people severely enough, a vaccine mandate may be objectively justified. There cannot be a principle forbidding a vaccine mandate.
This is the problem. The problem is that if I'm not infected, if I don't have COVID, I'm not a risk to you. And therefore, you can't force me to take a vaccine. Now, it is true that in a rational society, and let's say COVID was 10 times worse, right? Just to make it sharp, right? If I was infected and I infected you, I should be liable. If I knew I was infectious, if I knew I had the disease and I went out into the public and infected people, that could be criminal.
Yes, but if you knew, well, there are going to be some people who will intentionally not get tested so that they don't know that they are carriers and can plead, hey, I'm innocent. I didn't know I was infecting people.
Well,
I don't think that flies with me.
You can use that in court as negligence, right? So they were negligent and therefore they are liable. So, a court system, the rules of these things are pretty good. So you don't allow for these kind of loopholes. So if you could have gotten tested, didn't test, landed up carrying the disease and infecting other people, you'd still be liable under the rules of gross negligence. I think that's grossly negligent, right?
Yes, it would be, but
So
I think there will be situations in which the tests take too long, and the only way to prevent the risk is to vaccinate yourself.
So it would have-
Otherwise, you are risking other people's lives.
so you could stay home. You could never leave
Yes,
your
you could stay home, but if you go in public and it is likely, as calculated by an epidemiologist, that you are carrying the disease,
You
then
can't
I think a
prosecute
vaccine
somebody.
mandate.
You can't use force against somebody if there's just a probability that they might be a risk. They have to be a risk. So the onus of proof is on you if you're going to use force against them.
Well, the onus of proof, if there is a demonstrable risk, if somebody has enough gunpowder in his house to make 1,000 fireworks, that's a risk. If it explodes, it's going to kill 12 people, destroy 2 or 3 houses, and so on.
Yeah.
And I think we're in an analogous situation. Some things need to be forced on the basis of whatever objective science happens to be available.
Absolutely, it has to be an objective science. But again, I don't think you can force somebody who is basically innocent because they're not a carrier to take a vaccine. But you can do a lot of things to make it. So I said from the beginning, if somebody gets on a plane during a serious pandemic, knowing that they're sick and doesn't tell anybody, and infects a bunch of people, that's a criminal offense. And so you can create the incentive structure. Look, even if you get a vaccine right now, the probabilities are lower, but you can still infect other people. You can still get it. The probabilities are way low. So it's still true that force can only be used if there's a chance of, but and in that sense, you live in a world in which there's risk because you can't protect yourself against these because you can't protect yourself against these probabilities.
But if the risk depends on another person's actions, it's not a metaphysical risk, it's a deliberately created risk.
I don't think it's deliberate. If I have no reason to think that I have the disease, then I've not deliberately created it. Now, if I don't get tested and I land up carrying, then you could go after me for negligence. But you can't. I mean, I'm trying to think of an analogy, but there are all kinds of probabilities around people who engage in behavior that is risky. I don't know, for their age or for whatever, but unless they show, let's say we discover that on average, 90-year-olds on average commit huge numbers of traffic accidents. Does that mean we bar all 90-year-olds from the roads? I don't think so. You still have to say some 90-year-olds can drive pretty well, and therefore I'm not going to ban them. I'm going to figure out a way to only ban those people who are driving really, really poorly. And the same thing I think has to happen with the vaccine. It has to be if you test positive. So if you're a threat, then absolutely you have to be excluded. You have to be isolated. But if you're not, you don't have, the government shouldn't be in a position to force you to do it. Now, I can imagine a scenario where the virus is so deadly, where any exposure to it kills quickly, and that all kinds of emergency things would have to be done, where you could justify lockdowns and you could justify vaccines and so on. But that is a truly extraordinary occurrence. And it would have to be, it's kind of end of civilization type stuff.
Okay, I think we're getting into territory where we need an expert like Amesh.
Sure.
So I'm finished with this question. And I hope you have time for a second one.
I do.
Because it's it's one that I think you will enjoy asking and thinking about.
Good. So we'll definitely get to another one. All right, Daniel.
Last week, the Department of Education announced that it was wiping out more than 5.8 billion in student loan debt for approximately 323,000 borrowers deemed to have a total and permanent disability. At the same time, we have landlords and realtors that are in the Supreme Court arguing that the CDC should not be able to extend the eviction ban again. My question is, how did the bureaucracy get so much power? I mean, why doesn't the Supreme Court pull out a copy of the Constitution and say, where exactly does Congress have the authority to give you the ability to wipe away debt, which means stealing from the banks, right? I mean, they're just taking the banks and saying, boom, that money.
Well, in this case, it's not, right?
Oh.
So this is the thing. It's all government debt.
Okay.
So there are no bank student loans anymore.
I did not know that. Okay.
Basically, Obama nationalized the program.
Mhm.
So it used to be that the government backed, provided guarantees to the banks to do it.
Right.
And Obama said, this is stupid. Let's cut out the middleman, make it more efficient. The government will just do it. So the government basically today, there might be a few exceptions, but basically today covers all student loans.
Okay.
And so what they're doing is saying, yeah, you don't have to pay back the government. And it's free money, right? Because what difference does it make? It's the government giveth, the government taketh away. It's not, there's no cost. Of course, because the money's anticipated, it increases the debt, it increases the deficit. Somebody's going to have to cover it. So it has to come from taxes somewhere else, or debt or interest or something. There's no free lunch, as we know. But from their perspective, it's a free lunch. Why not forgive all government debts? So it's arguably within their authority. Now, this is the problem. It was never in their authority to give the debt, to give the loans, right? Where does it say in the Constitution? The government has the authority to give loans to anybody, never mind students. So, and the Supreme Court has long abandoned the doctrine that the Constitution limits government to only those activities delineated in the Constitution. The Supreme Court has accepted completely, right and left. Scalia was a major force in this. Accepted the idea that the government basically had unlimited power. And as long as it was exercised, quote, reasonably, they would find a constitutional excuse, right? Call a mandate a tax, and it's okay. How's it okay just to tax randomly? That, Roberts never told us. But so no, the Supreme Court's hopeless. And the hope that the Supreme Court could slow certain things down. So for example, because we have a First Amendment, there's a slight slowing down of the attack on free speech, right? We have a fairly good legal system when it comes to free speech, as long as it's not commercial speech. I mean, political speech. But for whatever reason, that's an issue that the precedents are all lining up on their favor, and left and right somewhat agree on the Supreme Court. So there's a solid majority on. That won't last, because the culture is moving away from free speech. So as the culture moves away from the idea of free speech, the consensus on the Supreme Court will move as well.
So how do you fix something like this? I mean, the eviction case is closer to private realtors and private landlords, right? Where it's a taking, right? In the name of health and safety, right? Can't have these people out on the street that have.
Yeah, it's a clearly completely bogus attempt to redistribute wealth. Nobody, when they passed the CDC, when they did this moratorium evictions under Trump, nobody pretended that this was a health issue. They didn't even pretend, really. They used this as an excuse. Obviously, it was just a form of redistribution of wealth. It seems like a no-brainer for the Supreme Court to rule against it. we'll see. It'll be really, really interesting. You've got maybe 3 justices that I would think would vote against it. Could they get to 5? Maybe. But it's very difficult when, Scalia was pro-democracy. I don't know. Most people don't know this about Scalia, but it's really interesting. And if you read Tara Smith's book, you'll find out more about this. But Scalia was very pro-democracy. He was very pro, if this is the will of the people, so be it, right? And he didn't believe in individual rights. He was explicitly anti-individual rights. He believed that individual rights were made up stuff. There was nothing there. In a sense, he was kind of an intrinsicist. I mean, show me the right. Where's the right? I can't see it. It doesn't. So he wasn't a believer in individual rights at all. Neither was Bork. He was much more of a, Wanda Freeman says Bork style. Yeah, it was much more of a Bork style conservative. And he pretended to be an originalist. He was an originalist in a sense, not of there were individual rights and the Constitution was written to protect them, but he was an originalist more about, well, I mean, this is the system of government we have. This is the Constitution we have, so we should respect it. Up to a point, because if the people had moved, then we have to move with them. He just accepted that because he didn't view it as anything objective, definitive. So the courts are not going to save us.
So a rewritten constitution wouldn't help it. You have to change the laws that are being written, which means changing the culture to bring different politicians in. I mean, I don't see another solution. Is there one?
There is no solution but to change the culture. That'll take 50 years. Let's hope the culture survives the next 50 years. It doesn't seem likely at this point.
Privatize education. That would help a lot.
Privatize education or at this point, beef up private education as much as you can. Try to get government to, I mean, even though I'm not a huge vouchers fan, anything at this point that weakens public education is fine with me. Go with vouchers, go with anything. Try to get private education solidified. Try to get more and more parents either homeschooling or sending their kids to better private schools like Higher Ground and others. And and I think that is the way to change the culture. There's just no alternative to it. There's no short one. There's no shortcut to any of that.
Took a long time to get here. Going to take a long time to fix it. Thank you.
Yes, I think it's going to take a long time to fix it. And this is why I tell people, focus on your lives, focus on making your lives better, focus on having a great life, because if you're waiting for politics to change, if that's what your life depends on, then you're screwed because it ain't happening anytime soon. All right, Debbie. I can't hear you and I can't see you. There you
Hi,
are.
Ron.
Hey, Debbie.
Here.
You're on your phone.
Yeah. I work in that office all day, and I just get tired of being on Zoom calls and sitting at that desk. So
Good feeling.
scenery. So I'm still reeling from something I heard on a podcast earlier today, which was What's Essential with Greg McEwen. He's the author of Essentialism, so he has a lot of really good stuff to say too. But so he had a guest, and the guest was talking about life extension technology. That is to say, technologically extending beyond the natural, currently achievable life. So talking about that, and he started by saying, he's pro that. He wrote a book about it. I don't recall the man's name right now off the top of my head, but so he was talking about some of the benefits, which seemed kind of self-evident to me, but yeah. So he mentioned things that would be good about it, and then the host said, "Well, but of course there's downsides too. You're just saying the upside outweighs the downside." And I thought, what downside? And then he cited a poll apparently this is actually a controversial issue. There was some poll taken. I don't know what exact demographic. It was Americans, some set of Americans that was a representative sample. Would you want to take a life extending technology that would extend your life to 150 or 200 years? And I'm still shocked by the percentage that said no.
Really?
It was more than 60% said
Of Americans?
Said no. Yeah. According to
Wow.
what I said on the podcast, I mean, I want to look it up and see if there's some details to parse out. They were not bringing it up in the context of trying to be sensational. They were bringing it up in the context of, yeah, you got a tough road ahead of you if you want to sell people on this technology.
And what did the guy who was defending life extension say in response?
Yeah, I know a lot of people are against it. There are downsides, like, for example, inequality.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yes, so this is I mean, it's so evil. It's hard to even respond. So in 2002, I think, or 3, George Bush commissioned a study. He had a bioethics panel assembled and commissioned a study to look into life extension and to make recommendations about it. About, is it good? Is it bad? What's going on? And it was headed by, God, what is the guy's name? Kessler. I don't know if it was Kessler. Anyway, I don't want to say the wrong name because I'm going to say horrible things about him. So I don't want to attribute it. Adam probably knows who I'm talking about. But anyway, this guy headed it up. He's a well-known conservative. He works at the American Enterprise Institute. And the committee came back and said, life extension.
Leon Kass.
Leon Kass.
And he is a fellow, not a worker at the American Enterprise Institute.
Yeah. So even worse, he's a well-regarded intellectual at the American Enterprise Institute. Leon Kass, one of the people I hate the most in the world. I've never met him. He came back and he said, no, life extension is not good. There are real problems with it. And they literally listed some of the problems that would have, what are we going to do with Social Security? Like people retired 65 and now they're going to live to be 150. How it's going to go bankrupt. How are we going to fund Social Security? Right. I mean, they couldn't even imagine the idea of maybe they wouldn't retire at 65, maybe,
Right.
what are people going to do? I mean, what are they going to do? They're going to be bored to hell. They're not going to have anything productive to do because they retired. So the whole social society would fragment because our societies are built on the family nucleus. Grandparents, parents, children. That's the family nucleus. It's a limited unit. It's got a certain size. It's worked for us since the beginning of time. We've always had it. It works. Family. It's the most important thing in the world. If you started to have great grandchildren, it's a disaster. Everything would fall apart. You couldn't handle it. The unit would grow too big, and the family would fall apart. It would disintegrate completely. And then the one I found,
there is something very interesting about that report, which is that it imposed a so-called bioethics review on all medical research in the United States. And it declared as a principle that old age is not a disease, and therefore medical research on curing old age is prohibited because you are only permitted to do medical research to cure diseases. And since old age is not a disease, medical research on life extension is prohibited in the United States?
Well, it's not that it's prohibited. It's that the government won't fund it, one, which is, and the government funds a lot of the basic research out there. And two, it's unlikely that the FDA would ever approve a treatment or a drug, if it's within the boundaries of what the FDA approves, that was focused on life extension. And indeed, I've talked to a lot of venture capitalists over the years because I was involved in a life extension company. I was on the board of a life extension company for a while. And the venture capitalists wouldn't fund because part of their argument was, if you have real IP, if you have real intellectual property, and you have something new, the FDA is not going to approve it. And if it's just a bunch of vitamins, you've got no competitive advantage. Anybody can make it. So there's no profit in it. So they if you think about, long term, what would the venture capitalists would love to invest in life extension because it's one of the most profitable businesses possible to man. I mean, we would pay a fortune to be able to live longer, but they literally will not invest in it, or very few of them. Peter Thiel will, because he's kind of a little bit of a maverick. A lot of very wealthy billionaires will do it privately. They'll invest in research privately, but not through a fund, because they know they can't get a return on it because the FDA won't approve it. Shahzad reminded me of one of the things that were in the report. One of the dangers of life extension is, and this relates to family and the importance of family, is that, and I often mention this and joke about this, is the rate of divorce will go up. I mean, literally, this is what was said. I read this paragraph and I was like, no. I mean, you could probably tolerate a spouse for 50 years, but 100 with the same spouse, that's impossible. Now, even if that were true,
who
who
cares?
the hell cares?
Two marriages. You could have two full
Fine,
happy.
what difference does it make?
People do it now.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly sick. And this is from conservatives.
Yeah.
And the left is the same way, because the left's attitude is, you live longer, more people on planet Earth, more resources being used, more carbon emissions, more destroying the environment. So they each have their God, and their God says, you should only live 80 years or whatever, and that's it. And neither one is willing to side with another God. I mean, what is one of the reasons that I did not vote? No, it's one of the reasons I voted for John Kerry in 2004. I mean, not the only reason, but one of them. I hated Bush so much that this would come out of the Bush administration was so sickening that that something like this would, beyond 9/11 and what he did around 9/11, that I just couldn't stand for it. Just couldn't stand for it. So yes, there is both on the right and on the left, there are people, and religious people, serious about being against life extension.
What shocks me, the non-ideological people. I've heard someone say it when I was in my early 20s at a party. We were talking about it, and I was saying how much I hope that by the time I get older, there's some kind of technology so I can live another 100 years or something. And another woman there at the party said, "Oh, not me. 75 years is enough."
Well, but that tells you a lot about their attitude towards life, right? And this is what's sad about the poll you mentioned. It really means that they hate their life. They're not enjoying it. They're not happy. They want it over. They don't have the balls to actually commit suicide. And the fact that 60% of Americans would say this just suggests the level of unhappiness, the level of misery, the level of dissatisfaction with life. And you can see it in the way they vote politically, in their attitude, in a lot of these things. People are unhappy, and they're unhappy because they don't have the proper guiding philosophy. And as a consequence, one of my favorite characters in I guess you can call it literature, is Lazarus in Robert Heinlein's science fiction writing. I don't know if you've ever read Time Enough for Love. Time Enough for Love. I read it. Granted, I read it in my 20s. I don't know how much I'd like it today, but in my 20s, I thought it was I loved that book. It was a fantastic book. It doesn't really have a plot because it's a bunch of vignettes, but it's about this guy who lives basically forever. And yeah, he marries lots and lots of times, partially because the women age and he doesn't. He stays young, which is a problem. But just this idea of him getting the span of history and seeing all these changes and living through it all and having all these adventures and going to different planets and wow, I mean, that sounds like so much fun. Why would anybody want to give that up? I mean, that's exactly what you need. So yes, I want to live to be 20,000. So
yes,
I'll take 150 as a compromise, but 20,000 is the goal.
Or more,
Yes.
Just, I can't understand someone who just would say, I'd rather not exist just because I'm bored.
They're bored and they're unhappy. They're unhappy.
Yeah.
Life is a struggle. Life is suffering. This is what made what's his name? Peterson so successful, telling people how hard life is, because that's how they experience it. They experience it as a bad thing, Right? And the book, somebody asked what the name of the book was. The book was Time Enough for Love. Time Enough for Love. Time Enough for Love. I think that's right. Time Enough for Love by Robert Heinlein. It might be my favorite Heinlein book of all the Heinlein's books. I actually think it's better than The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which is the one the libertarians all love. And The Moon is a Harsh Mistress actually has a Randian in it. So it has an objectivist character in the book, which is interesting because Heinlein was influenced by Ayn Rand and obviously knew of Ayn Rand. You could tell different influences in his writing. All right. All right, let's see. Let's take a $20 question and then we'll go back to the panel. You guys are doing like $5 questions and $6 questions. You're not going to get priority if you do that. You want priority, you have to do $20. All right. Oh, we got a $50 question. This is good. Here is way off topic. Everything today is way off topic because there is no topic. So we're good. The Pledge of Allegiance was in the news a while ago because schools were mandating their pupils recite it. I'm against it because to me, it is nationalistic and collectivistic at its core. What are your thoughts around it? I don't think schools should mandate it. I don't think that it is appropriate. I don't think that that kids are in a position to pledge allegiance. Adults are. It's something you do when you're 18. You can pledge allegiance. But a kid is not. You're teaching him, in a sense, to mindlessly pledge to something they know very little about. They don't know what the flag represents. They don't know what America represents. They haven't really studied American history yet. They don't know what it is they're pledging allegiance to. So it's too blindly patriotic. I'm not against the pledge in and of itself, but a pledge of allegiance needs to be made not as a duty, not in blind obedience, but from a position of understanding, from a position of, yeah, this is something I want to pledge to. This is something that's important to me. This is something that I support. And that 5-year-olds can't do that. 10-year-olds can't do that. Maybe you start at 15, 14, 15, maybe, right? But it's not, the idea is you got to get love of country into them when they're very, very young. No, it's exactly the opposite. They've got to develop love of country. Love of country is not an automatic. It's not a must. It's not a requirement. It's not what being a citizen is. The country might not deserve your love. Right now, love of country, in America right now. Look at what's happening in the world right now, right out there. So I'm not a fan of children pledging a Pledge of Allegiance. Let's see. Shazbot asks, How much for you to review a single hour television episode? Oh, I don't know. Let's make it $250, half of a movie. Most movies are around 2 hours. So $250 for a single hour television episode. All right. We got that. All right, let's go back to Nick.
Yeah. Okay, I'm on. All right. I wanted to ask you on some of the stuff you sent us on capitalism. There was some. It gave me an idea in terms of if you had to have, if you had to name the interactions that you've had that were full of drama, such as that Clemson University with the woman who, the student who was asking you about Africa, and you started, talking about how we stole the resources, and you called her out and you said BS. That's not, it was full of drama. There was interaction back and forth, and she tried to talk it over. Do you know the one I'm talking about? What's his name was on there moderating it? The history. You know the one huh? Yeah.
Bad time. So was this during the debate with Andrew Sullivan?
I don't. No. I don't think there was a debate. I don't know. Maybe it was. I don't think it was. But
okay,
she was there. Yeah. No. Remember, but the interaction was full of drama. She in terms of there was that one. There was the one where you had a lot of views in Germany, where they were screaming from the audience about.
Germany was the Netherlands. It was Maastricht.
Yeah, the welfare state is the cause for all our prosperity, and they were just getting all the leftists were just getting triggered. What other ones are there? I mean, I think you should have what I call here's a marketing ploy: a take no Yaron and a take no prisoners category, where it's clickbait and they go right to it. So those are two for sure. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's more that you thought was.
Yeah, there's plenty. There was the one in Maastricht. The problem with that one, of course, is the video's not that good because the guy's videotaping from an iPhone way from the back.
Right.
There's one in, I think it was Belgrade, where some kid, I don't know, I can't remember what the question was, but it was about
communism.
It was about communism. And what did I say? I said something.
You're a greedy bastard.
Yeah, and I said, yes, I'm going to make money and I'm going to die rich and hell with you, something like that.
But you made an excellent point in terms of I want my iPhone and there's the NIH, the National Institute for Health one, where I tell them that the National Institute for Health is killing you in England. That was in Britain. There was the one at the inequality talk in England at Exeter University, where I did the sweatshops. That's probably the most famous one. It's the why sweatshops are good. And that got the most views of anything I've ever done, because Charlie Cook, in the days before he was a Trump, mindless Trump follower, actually put it up on the website of Turning Point, and it went viral through Turning Point, and it got millions of views. And there were some other ones at Exeter. Exeter was a good place for these kind, and I'm sure there were others from other universities. Basically, but my point,
and angry,
you're at your best.
The best comes out, yes.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, if Action Jackson's out there, he should have some kind of a category, a take no prisoners category, where people get entertained. That's what they want, right? You get clickbait, and then they'll look further. It's like an hors d'oeuvre, and have those 7 or 8 or 10, whatever they are, under whatever category you want to call it.
All right. I've written it down. I will tell Action Jackson, but Action Jackson wants to have a conversation with you, Nick, about your marketing ideas. So you can.
Yeah, we'll all get together. We'll do it. You said October, so
yeah.
I'm giving you a little preamble.
Chandler says, make Action Jackson work more. Yeah, Ali. Let's make Action Jackson work more. All right, good. Thanks. That's a good idea. I think it is. The challenge is, of course, millions of people saw that video clip. Oh, this is the thing that Turning Point did. They put the clip up. They didn't put my name on it. The bastards, right? They didn't put any attribution. So some people in the comments said, this is your own book, but they just put the video up. I mean, this is what happens when this stuff is just a free fall. All right, Daniel.
There's news that, okay, so let me back up. We've got a new telescope going up that's going to replace Hubble. It's called right now the James Webb Space Telescope. And there's a movement to get it renamed because they say James Webb was anti-LGBT plus. And they quote some things, the fact that he was undersecretary to the State Department back in the 40s during the Lavender Scare, and it was part of his job to pass out some memos that he didn't even write himself. And in 1963, Clifford Norton was fired for immoral and improper. I've forgotten. I read the court case.
Yep.
And so anyway, they're saying, hey, this guy shouldn't have a telescope named after him. And I'm just wondering, you know, in evaluating something like this, how this guy was not a leader of a movement, right? He didn't come out and say, hey, let's make anti-LGBTQT a thing, you know, in the government. He's a bureaucrat, right? And you can definitely argue that the government shouldn't even be building this telescope and that shouldn't be named after a bureaucrat, but as bureaucrats go, he seems okay. I mean, I don't know.
I think your criteria is right. I think it's, if this is so a number of things. One, you have to take into account the historical context. Everybody was being fired for being gay and stuff all over the country, including in Hollywood and other places. Rock Hudson stayed in the closet for decades in liberal Hollywood. So you can't take a position that somebody had or that somebody lost a job under his watch. People lost, I mean, Clinton was anti-gay marriage, Obama was anti-gay marriage. I mean, are they going to take their portraits off and not name any buildings after them because they were thus? And they had less of an excuse, right, than somebody in the 40s or 50s. And then the other criteria is, so one is, what's the context? What's the historical context in the position? And then the second one is, was this the thing they were fighting over? That is this their main achievement in life, right? To some extent, it's the same as it's not the same, but it's, you still have to respect Thomas Jefferson, because even though he had slaves, even though he was wrong about slaves, in my view, because his main achievement was unrelated. His main achievement was, in a sense, undermining the whole thing, undermining slavery. But he wasn't out there advocating for slavery. If he'd been advocating for slavery, I would be a lot more sympathetic to, there's a problem with Jefferson. But it wasn't the thing that he did with his life. So it wasn't the movement that he led. It wasn't the issue that defined him. So, so you have to look at those two aspects. How much was this the issue that defined the person? How much was it also a question of the time in which they lived? By these kind of criteria, nobody in history would be celebrated for anything, because almost all of them were, racism was prevalent everywhere for forever. In human history, it's only in the last few decades that maybe since World War II that racism has been considered an anathema. Even many of the figures, the good figures of the Enlightenment, had very horrible things to say about certain races, right? And you can't wipe out all of their achievements and all of their stuff because of that. Certainly with regard to homosexuality, trans would not even be conceivable to people. So it's not even LGBTQ, it's just, Just homosexuality was you know, it's gone through phases. There've been periods in history where it's been more acceptable. There have periods in history where it hasn't. But I mean, most people, most periods of history, they've been very against homosexuality with tragic consequences. You know?
Sure, sure. And with Thomas Jefferson, it looks to me at times like people that are attacking him would also say, well, all great figures have clay feet, right? If you go looking, you can find
Sure.
the bad of everybody.
Sure, and the difference is with a like a General Lee is General Lee fought for slavery, fought to defend the institution of slavery. That's very different, and that's what he's remembered for as the commanding general. I don't know what else he did in life because I've never looked into Lee's life, but it can't be anything important. This is what was important about his life: that he fought, he led the troops of the South. Therefore, toppling, you know, moving Lee's statues into museums away from public spaces is not something I object to, right? But Jefferson, you know, or any of these other people, I mean, Lincoln, they want to topple Lincoln statues. It's absurd because he said something one day that is not politically correct today, right? It's insane.
Yeah. Here in Chicago, right, they tried to pull Columbus's statue down. They want to rename Columbus, you know, and there's a big Italian community here that's still very supportive of him.
Yeah, but that's sad that they're supportive of Columbus because he was Italian. Who the hell cares?
Right.
The Italians wouldn't even fund him. The Italians betrayed him. The Italians standing in there, he had to go to, and the Portuguese wouldn't fund him. He had to go to Spain to get the funding to do the trip. So it's the Spanish who should really be supporting him. But yeah, the whole thing is tribal and non-essential, and people don't know how to evaluate history. And you know, I'm reading Opa because I have to give a talk about Opa. Knowledge is contextual. You can't you know, take today's context and impose it on the past. That is absurd. It's non-epistemology. It's non-thinking. It's unthinking, or whatever the technical term is. It's the opposite of thinking. You can't do that. So you can't evaluate these historical figures by those standards.
Thank you.
Adam.
Okay. Do you know who Kizzmekia Corbett is?
No.
Okay, you should, because she is responsible, and let me see if I can get her picture on screen. Okay, select and share. Okay, Kizzmekia Corbett invented a couple of years before we had COVID a general platform for rapidly making vaccines. The idea was that you built an all-purpose messenger RNA start and end, and then if you insert the right piece of the virus messenger RNA between that start and that end, you have a vaccine against the new virus from which you just extracted that right piece of messenger RNA. And then when COVID came about, she selected the right piece to insert between the start and the end of this mRNA sequence. And in 48 hours, she had a vaccine against COVID. And
yes, I know this story, but I didn't associate with the name. But yes, I mean, she's a real hero.
Now, why is her name not publicized? Well, the core of the critical race theory curricula that many people at universities and other institutions are forced to be indoctrinated in is the idea that science and technology are expressions of white supremacy and white racism.
Yep.
And that is why you didn't hear the name Kizzmekia Corbett.
Yep. No.
If her very discoveries and career did not contradict critical race theory, you would be hearing her and seeing her all over.
I mean, absolutely.
Because she's a great inventor, and she had the vaccine in 48 hours. And if it were not for the delay by the FDA, volunteers such as myself would have been able to be vaccinated within days, literally.
Yes, no, both Moderna had it in 48 hours, and the German company had it. Yes, I mean, she grew up in North Carolina. She is, I think she comes from a pretty modest background. She should be a role model for kids in terms of, here's a woman, a minority who grew up in a pretty modest environment and unbelievably successful. She should be everywhere. You can stop sharing the screen. I think, are you sharing the screen? Yep.
Yes, I'm sharing the screen, and I'm going to unshare it.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, she got.
Let me see if I can find the right control.
She got her PhD.
Unshare it.
She got a PhD in microbiology from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, a great university of 2014. So she's a young scientist who comes out with a discovery that changes everything. And really, what are we doing now? Oh, now we're seeing your computer screen.
I'm trying to find
okay. I got rid of it.
Okay, very good.
Okay. So I agree
you would have known, you would have recognized the name if she were given the recognition that she deserves.
Absolutely.
And
the only reason she wasn't because of the color of her skin and ideology of the racist critical race theory, which penalizes successful blacks just like the white supremacists penalize successful blacks.
Well, it's not just successful blacks, it's that according to critical race theory, objectivity, the foundation of science, is white racism. Science is white racism.
Yes.
Technology is white racism. Capitalism, like what Moderna is doing, is white racism.
Well,
and somehow, I don't know if there was a get-together of the editors of the newspapers and TV channels, but she's not getting 1% of the exposure that she would get if she were a white male.
yes.
Now that's real anti-black, anti-woman racism.
Yes, no, I think that's right. Now, it's true that she didn't make somebody says she didn't make the fundamental discoveries leading to mRNA COVID vaccine. That's true, but she made a crucial contribution to making it possible for the mRNA vaccines to be developed quickly. She's been recognized. She now has a position at Harvard School of Public Health, where she is leading a vaccine research team. She's young, so they wouldn't give it to her unless she was exceptional. Racism always has meaning. The fact that people use it, somebody says racism has no meaning now. No, racism has meaning. people are using it in a meaningless way. But yeah, racism has huge amount of meaning. It's only $25. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, well, that was my second point. Why are the media so silent about her?
Well, I'd say that's part of it. But another part of it is that the media is broadly silent about the development of the vaccines. So, I mean, the woman who pushed mRNA for years and years and years, an Hungarian scientist, who is a real hero and works for BioNTech in Germany, and was involved in the development of their vaccine, and who did all the academic research and pushed and wrote the papers and everything. Her name is not a household name, and Moderna and Pfizer are not exactly treated as heroes. They're treated as exploiters. They've exploited, somehow they've exploited COVID to produce these vaccines. The culture is so anti-pharmaceutical, anti-business, and segments of it anti-science. And then you add to that critical race theory and the fact that if she's Black, we don't want to have her associated with science, as you said, because science is a white, racist thing. And if she's Black, we don't want to, highlight the fact that she was involved in this vaccine. And by the way, one of the biggest victims of this is the Black community in the United States who are not getting vaccinated. So people talk about the anti-vaxxers as all being right-wing whites, but the fact is that a far lower percentage of Blacks and Hispanics are being vaccinated than whites. And that has more to do with conspiracy theories, a distrust of science, because science is white, a distrust of capitalism, of Pfizer and Moderna, a general distrust of government, and therefore a distrust of vaccines because they are being promoted by government. So it's a wide. There are many causes for why many of these, in particular Kizzy, but more broader than that, why the whole huge achievement of these drug companies is just being, in a sense, suppressed and barely talked about. It's as if the vaccines appeared out of nowhere, thanks to, if you're on the right, Trump, because of warp speed, or if you're on the left, Biden. It's a miracle of politics. And indeed, on the left-wing podcast, they all talk about the fact that all of this is a consequence of government funding, that none of this would have happened without government funding.
Okay, I should add, since you mentioned Trump, that Taiwan's intelligence service knew that there was a new, very severe respiratory disease in Wuhan and communicated this fact to the United States intelligence community on November 21st. So the entire 3 months after that, which would have been time to get together the personal protective equipment for hospitals and make all the preparations for a pandemic, Trump essentially ordered the intelligence agencies to keep this secret. And they kept it secret following his orders until China publicized the mRNA sequence of the
and
virus.
even then, he refused to really take action in any significant way. So, I mean, the whole thing from beginning to end is a Trump cover-up. I hadn't heard about the Thai intelligence, but it makes sense. It's why the Taiwanese, on the other hand, were completely prepared, ready, did everything right at the beginning, and averted this whole thing because they never trusted the Chinese. They knew something was up. They had some intelligence, and they acted in the beginning of January. They were already, on top of this, and we did nothing. We covered it up.
Well, it's not really we, it's the president who gives orders to the
Sure.
intelligence agencies.
Sure. It's our
And our intelligence agencies, if this fact were reported and the hospitals were able to get masks, gowns, respirators, we wouldn't have had this first wave of 100,000 casualties.
I agree. And not only that, but we would have been able to, if we ramped up testing at that point, like the Taiwanese did, we got the testing ready, we got the tracers ready, we would have done, test, trace, isolate more effectively. We were way too late on that. And by the time we tried to do it, the tracers were there were too many cases. You just couldn't keep track.
Well, it wasn't too many cases. It's that Trump prohibited the testing of anyone who did not visit China. So he could claim that it's a Chinese virus and that there is no community transmission in the United States.
Well,
and if it had not been for a heroic scientist
in Seattle,
in Seattle, Helen True.
She's in Seattle. She's in Washington. She was the first one to discover COVID in the United States, violating the
Trump order. Not
yeah, absolutely.
Essentially, Trump's order was that this is a Chinese virus. Testing anyone who had not been to China had been prohibited.
Mm-hmm.
So he was responsible for, number one, a 3-month delay in warning the hospitals that they needed ventilators and masks and everything else they needed. And number two, he actively prevented the testing that was necessary to slow down the spread of the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean,
so I would say, if there were fiction about the embodiment of absolute evil, he would be right up there with Leon Kass.
Yeah, I mean, I am more viciously anti-Trump than I am anti-Leon Kass for a variety of reasons. Leon Kass I can deal with. Trump is a phenomena that's hard to deal with, which is what makes him so much more dangerous. Debbie.
Oh, the sun good.
Oh, and you're breaking up. You're breaking up. You've lost some power.
So
Whoops. Now you're frozen and breaking up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better. You there?
Okay, I killed the video, so maybe now you can hear me?
Yes, that's much better.
Yeah, okay, so the mask mandates are back in California,
yep.
At least in the Silicon Valley area. I don't know if it's statewide.
LA as well.
Okay, right. Although I'm happy to say that I recently mailed in my ballot to recall Gavin Newsom.
That's good.
So that felt good. I don't know. We'll see how it comes out. But that wasn't what this was about. It got me wondering. It's been a year and a half. Certain people are just obstinate about not getting vaccinated, and these variants are coming, and it's continuing to be present. And I wonder. I mean, do you think there's a scenario in which the mask mandates just don't go away? If COVID isn't completely eradicated, that they just never let us go back to how it was. I'd never crossed my mind until the mask mandates came back again, and I thought, we're pretty much on a trajectory out of this thing. Not to where we were before. There's been damage done that's permanent, probably to the culture and certainly to a lot of people's lives. But I wonder, if it might just permanently do this sort of thing, you know, with the masks and the screening and the testing and.
You know, some places might. I don't think it would be widespread. There's also movement towards, you know, mandating vaccines, and I think you're going to see that. You're going to see pressure to do that, particularly now that the vaccines are being approved by the FDA. So I think the government has was going to claim more of a case for this. You're already seeing, for example, you can't go to a restaurant in Puerto Rico by law. This is not the restaurant demanding this. This is by law. You cannot go into a restaurant in Puerto Rico without either showing a vaccine or a negative test. And that's true in most places like restaurants, like concert halls, places like that. There's going to be more and more of that by law, not as a choice. Now, there's always going to be pressure against that from business owners. So I don't think it's going to last everywhere. There might be particular places around the country where it lasts, because there is a lobby not to do it because it hurts business. So people are going to lobby against it. But it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, the CEO of Pfizer the other day said that he wouldn't be surprised if we saw a mutation of the virus that was vaccine resistant. I mean, that would be pretty, and well, it depends on how dangerous that was, but you could also see the vaccine becoming more dangerous. Usually vaccines mutate to becoming less, but it could mutate to become more dangerous. There's a lot of things that could happen where things get worse and they last for a very long time, much longer than any of us expected. I mean, I thought this would be over well over a year ago. I mean, I thought it would be in the summer of last year. And it hasn't. This virus is not particularly seasonal. I mean, there's just a bunch of things about this virus that are not typical. And on top of that, because of the pathetic response of so many governments around the world, this virus is allowed to spread. The more it spreads, the more it mutates, the more hosts it has, the more opportunities it has to mutate. The sooner you get a handle on it, the better. Now, I mean, Amish, last time I had him on the show, said, we're just going to have to live with it. It's going to be here forever. And that means that in certain jurisdictions that are super risk averse, where people are willing to tolerate things like masks, you might see mask mandates for a very, very long time, and maybe forever. I don't know. It's you know, why not, from the statist perspective, why not use this as an opportunity to take more control? Whether you're left or right, it doesn't matter. What matters is control. So why not take more control? And if you think about it, even the governors on the right are taking more control by banning school districts, or, you know, usually Republicans are for let the smallest unit make decisions, let school districts make decisions about kids, let cities make decisions about their cities. But when it comes to COVID, no, the governor is going to decide for everybody that they can't do these things, not for the right reasons, not for constitutional reasons, but for reasons of control. So all of them are using this to increase their control and to appease whatever constituency they have, whatever the constituency happens to be. So it's very depressing to see these things. It really is. And you know, just think about what would happen if this got really deadly. I mean, right now it's not that deadly.
Oh man, it would just, the government would just.
Well, imagine what would happen. This is the nightmare scenario. Imagine a virus that killed children.
We'd literally be locked in our houses.
It's hard to fathom at this point, given how pathetic the response has been, how awful, you know, the whole system has been, for a virus that is not that bad. I mean, it's bad, but it's not that bad. Amish keeps saying, we were trained and we were practicing and we were ready and we were writing reports about the big one, the real killer one, kind of the Middle East coronavirus, which kills like 40% or something, and is luckily it's not transmittable. It doesn't transfer very easily, or an Ebola-like virus. We didn't think the whole system would collapse over something like this.
Yeah,
it has. The whole system collapsed, and because of horrific decision-making from our politicians, but not just in the United States, throughout the Western world. All of the politicians, all of them throughout the Western world, blew this. The only people who got it right were the people like the Taiwanese and to some extent the South Koreans, but almost nobody else.
Well, you know what's not depressing? Okan. And I'm literally going to go pack right now.
Excellent. Excellent.
So
I'm
thank
already
you very
packed.
much.
I'm already
And
packed.
I will see you there.
Excellent. Thanks, Debbie. See you there.
Okay,
Adam's
bye.
going to be there, and we've got a few of our super chatters are there. All right, let's do some $20 questions. Mad writes, I've seen a lot of rage against unvaccinated using healthcare resources. Perhaps this is an example of the evil of socialized medicine that will strike home, subsidizing the irrational decisions of others. Yeah, I mean, but this is the case with, we pay for the healthcare costs of, if they're over 65, of smokers, of obese people, of people who have not taken care of themselves, who have not stayed in shape, who have abused their bodies. Yet, if they're getting Medicare, you're paying for it. Even if they're not Medicare, because of the way our insurance system is regulated, their health expenses are ultimately going to be spread over the healthy population and funded to the healthy population. As part of the whole goal of Obamacare was to spread the risk to healthy people. The whole point was to get young people to enroll so that they could pay in, so that they would pay in to support the unhealthy behaviors of others. COVID is just exacerbating that, while I have not seen a lot of rage about this. So, and it's certainly, I think the rage is more about the unvaccinated, but using the healthcare resources, I wish I saw more rage about it, because that would be an opening. But people seem to think that even if you make irrational decisions, healthcare is a right. The unvaccinated getting sick is just one more example of that, and the tolerance that we have. I mean, if people had to pay to go to the emergency room, maybe they'd be more careful, and maybe part of being more careful would be to take a vaccine. But part of making it free, part of making it all free, is the fact that people behave irresponsible. The incentives do work. They don't work 100%, but they do work. And if you make it costless, then people can behave and often do behave irresponsibly. Chandler says, Okan hype. Where's the hype? But everybody should be at Okan. When I talk to leftists about reason, they always respond with, people have biases, no one is objective and rational. The word bias is often used to dismiss reason and objectivity. How would you respond to this? I'd respond by, the whole point of reason is to overcome those, is to address the biases. And the whole point of being objective is to apply reason consistently, to be guided by reality. But you see, what they consider objective is out-of-body experience. Objective is if it's not you, right? And this is the unique perspective that objectivism has about objective, what objective means. Objective is you. It's your consciousness. It's your consciousness and reality interacting. It's not consciousness as a passive thing and reality just imprints. You have to be active. So to be objective means to engage in logic, to engage in a particular method, and to engage your mind, which requires free will. So it's volitional. Objectivity is volitional. And it's volitional in a sense that it requires you to use logic to evaluate the facts. Make sure they don't contradict. Make sure that your evaluation of the facts is right. But objective isn't it's dispassionate in the sense that it's free of emotions, but it's not dispassionate in the sense that it's free of you. You have to be the one who's objective. There's nobody else. There's no other way to do it. It's your mind. Right? And that's why being objective doesn't guarantee that you'll be right. It's the best you can do to be right, but it doesn't guarantee being right. So if you think about it, the world has really two views about the way we comprehend reality: intrinsic and subjective. Intrinsic means reality just implants itself on you. And that's what they view as objective. And of course, reality doesn't do that. So they say, well, then you see, you can't be objective. So we're all just subjective. And therefore, reason is just subjective. And because you're engaged in the process of figuring out what's real and what's not. You're not just passive about it. So they take our means of understanding, of knowing, of being aware of, and understanding and integrating reality, and they turn it against you as if it's not giving you reality. And this is, of course, Kant and Plato. But Kant is the devious one in terms of creating this particular mechanism of turning yourself against your own senses and against your own mind. And that's the genius of objectivism. It says, no. Reality doesn't do either of those. It's not implanting and it's not whatever you feel like. Reality needs to be, in a sense, discovered. It's out there, but your consciousness has to discover it, not just by opening your eyes and seeing, but by actively engaging with forming concepts and understanding and integrating and using logic to understand the world around you. But that's exactly what Plato, Kant, all philosophers reject that you have the capacity to do, including, somebody like Sam Harris, who is also one of these reality implants itself on you. It's the only way you can understand why he believes that he's discovered the truth through meditation. Because in meditation, he's not involved. And he says that there's no I when you meditate, at least not when you meditate, when you take LSD. So when you take LSD, there's no I. So true reality, real reality, implants yourself on you when you're on LSD. And that's when you know the truth, not when you're conscious and there's an I and there's a you and there's logic and reason. It's when you negate all that, when all that disappears, when you manage to push it to the back. LSD does that. It pushes all that to the back. Then reality just implants itself on you and you know the truth. Therefore, when you're awake, when you're off of drugs, when you're completely engaged, that's not real. What's real is when your consciousness is completely gone and the drug is taken over. And that is so bizarre. That is so illogical. That is so irrational. But that's Sam Harris, the man of reason. This is what they mean by reason. Reason is, and this is why he's anti-free will. Because if truth just plants itself on you, if consciousness just receives it, then you don't need, what's the purpose of free will? Right? You don't need will. You just open your eyes and stuff happens. Whereas objectivism holds that it's you engaging your mind to discover reality. That's how you get knowledge. That's how you get knowledge about the world. And that's what objective knowledge is. All right, let's see. Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that I just read all those chapters in Opa, and I still don't completely have it integrated. It's the epistemology, sections of the epistemology are hard. I get certain things I get concept formation. I think I really understand concept formation, but objective, I can say it, but I can't say that it's fully integrated. It's hard. It's hard. All right, let's go run through these super chat questions. In pirating and watching movies without paying for them immoral? Yeah, you're stealing. Doesn't matter if you pirate it after you already bought it once. I don't know what that means. If you bought it, you bought it. No, you shouldn't pirate movies and music. Somebody created them. Somebody's trying to make a living off of them. And you're stealing from them. You're making it impossible for them to make a living off of the creative work that they did. It's an act of injustice. G7 leaders meeting to discuss Afghanistan, all clueless on how to act, but believing that getting together will enlighten them. Well, it's as I've always said, when you're clueless, you want to form groups, you want to form tribes, you want to get the security of other people, you want to get that emotional feedback that it's okay. They're clueless too. You're not the only clueless one. Yeah, I mean, they're all clueless, and so the Chinese and the Russians, who think this is a good thing, right? That the Taliban, putting down America is a good thing. But the fact is that this is a radical Islam winning, or totalitarian Islam, or Islamism, jihadism winning. And the jihadists don't like the Russians, and they don't like the Chinese either. So it's just a matter of time, guys. And the Chinese know this. This is why they're suppressing. This is why they've got those camps in Western China. They're all Muslims in those camps. But they're being pragmatic, just like the rest of the world. As long as we have free speech, we win, I think. I think so too, Michael. But will we have free speech, and for how long? Do you think the media Hollywood is responsible for a negative view of capitalism? Gordon Gekko on Wall Street and a bad guy in many movies being a so-called conniving evil capitalist. I think media and Hollywood are responsible for reinforcing the negative view of capitalism, but they're not responsible in and of themselves for the negative view of capitalism. That responsibility is to the philosophers and intellectuals and economists and all the intellectuals out there who are constantly advocating anti-capitalist positions, constantly hopping on the issues of inequality and other issues that they condemn capitalism morally. All what the artists are doing is they take that and they put it into an art form, and that reinforces it in the public's minds. It's a channel of communication from the intellectuals to the public of philosophical ideas, and art has always worked that for better. You get Michelangelo's David before you have a culture of reason, but Michelangelo's already providing those ideas in the form of art to the people, and you get it in the negative sense in terms of movies portraying capitalists as bad. But the origin of that idea are the intellectuals. Michael asked, "Do you see what's happening in Australia?" Yes, I talked about it last show. I think it's just horrible. They are forcing children to be vaccinated without parental consent. Being averse to confrontation is no longer a luxury afforded to anyone who values liberty. Yeah, it's people in the streets, not a lot, but I mean, basically, Sydney is locked down, Chinese style lockdown, and they've been locked down for 10 weeks, and there's no end in sight. I mean, Debbie was worried about masks. In Australia, you can't leave your home. And Melbourne was like this. It's just truly horrific. AIM, do you think hyperinflation of the US dollar is likely to occur considering the larger increase in money supply? Not in the short run, no. Also, how is it not immoral and theft to steal your citizens' wealth in this way? It is immoral and theft to steal your citizens' wealth in this way. It clearly is. Inflation is immoral, but price inflation, is a far more complex phenomena that people give it credit for. What money is far more complex. Is the money supply increasing? Are you sure the money supply is increasing? How do you measure the money supply? What is the money supply? There are a lot of economists out there who I trust, who claim the money supply is not increasing a lot. Not if you properly think about money. And I've talked about this in the show before. For example, when the Fed buys government bonds, it's issuing money and bonds out of circulation. That seems like it's increasing the money supply because there's more money. But some economists, and I think there's some validity to this claim, are arguing that government debt is money. It's zero interest rate. Government debt is money. There's no difference between money and government debt at zero interest rate. They're selling at par, basically. That's what zero interest rate means. And therefore, they're interchangeable with money. And indeed, wealthy people can use them to buy certain things or to use them as collateral as if they're money, because they are money. So is the Federal Reserve really increasing the money supply when it's swapping, debt for cash? Maybe not. Maybe they're just shifting the type of money, and that shifting the type of money has impacts on the economy by allocating capital in particular ways. But is it literally raising the quantity of money? And I think that the answer is no. And I think that most Austrian economists who theorize about this did not do this under the assumption of zero interest rates, which exist right now. And very few economists understand finance. So they underestimate the impact financial markets have on money. All economists know is what the banks do. Austrian economists in it, but financial markets are much bigger than the banks, are much more important than the banks. And yet it's not clear to me how you measure these things and how you measure money. And the fact that we've seen trillions and trillions of dollars go into the banking system and have no inflation, no price inflation or significant price inflation, suggests to me that there's something more complex going on here. I mean, at the simplest level, the banks are holding this money in reserve at the Fed, and it's not circulating. That's obvious. But also, I think taking bonds out of circulation is not increasing the money supply. Now, when they were buying mortgage-backed securities, they were increasing the money supply because mortgage-backed securities are not money. But when they buy government bonds, which is most of what they do, it's not clear that it's increasing. So again, it's complicated, much more complicated than most of us think. And that's why so many people are wrong about predicting hyperinflation over and over and over again, and it doesn't happen because they don't know how to measure it. Now, that doesn't mean it's not bad what they're doing and it doesn't have negative consequences. It is bad and it's having awful negative consequences. It's just not negative consequences as manifest in price inflation. It's primarily manifest in misallocation of capital, which leads to low economic growth, which is a tragedy. All right, what do you think of Bioshock? I've never played it, but I've heard it's terrible. A video game with main villain taking Ayn Rand's ethics. Well, taking a straw man of Ayn Rand's ethics, right? Not Ayn Rand's ethics. I hope you answer this question. You should look into it. Oh no, I'm familiar with Bioshock. When it came out, I was interviewed by the press many times about Bioshock. I think I was on a show once with the guy who wrote Bioshock, and like a little discussion or something. A lot of people came to Objectivism through Bioshock, so I'll give them credit for that. You know, sometimes bad publicity is still good because it brings the ideas, it brings the name at least to people's consciousness. So Bioshock is a straw man presentation, right? A misinterpretation of Ayn Rand's philosophy in a dystopian world, and it's bad in that sense. On the other hand, I've heard from people who played it that it's a very good game, core game. It's very well done, and it was a huge hit. And I think it introduced a lot of people to Ayn Rand, and as a consequence, they read Atlas Shrugged and they discovered that the game was not representative of the true philosophy. All right, two last questions, and then we'll call it a night. I'll go back to preparing for my talk. Do you see any 9/11 conspiracy theories as valid? No. As an engineer, can you respond to the claims about the jet fuel not weakening the steel? Well, it's just nonsense. So it's true that the jet fuel wouldn't have melted the steel. Steel, that kind of steel in a building like that would not melt from jet fuel. But it would weaken. There's no question about that. There's no engineer on planet Earth who would say that if you put that kind of heat to metal, it won't weaken the metal. You learn that. I learned that in the first class of basic material science. Under heat, metals weaken. And the more heat you apply, the more they weak. They become weak. They don't have to melt for it to happen. And the towers collapsed completely consistent with that. All it took is on one floor to drop, right? For it to weaken enough so that the concrete slabs just drop, because it's all anchored on a central column. So you know, as soon as all the cantilevers weaken, the whole floor just drops. And once the floor drops, the whole structure is destabilized, and the floors above it start dropping. And of course, they collapse all the floors below it. And when that happens, the central column also starts collapsing, right? It collapses upon itself. So they collapsed at the top where the plane actually flew in. The plane flew in relatively high. And then the fact that they collapsed all the bottom floors. And it's a classic way in which you'd expect metal fatigue to manifest itself. And that's exactly what happened. It was metal fatigue, right? The heat weakened the steel. It did not melt the steel. But that's all it takes. These things are finely tuned buildings that are not designed to withstand an airplane going into them. That wasn't conceivable to any engineer design buildings like that. Right. Let's see. At this point, if someone unvaccinated died of COVID, I don't care. I feel like they've made their own choice, and actions have consequences. Yep. I mean, that is right. Actions do have consequences. And, you know, I don't wish them to die, but, you know, this is life. And if you don't take the basic precautions, and they're low cost precautions, because the vaccines are so safe, that there's just no reason not to be vaccinated at this point. There really isn't. If you're an adult, and if you face any kind of risk from this, there's just no reason to do this. Yes, for those of you who didn't know, I am a civil engineer in a previous life, granted, but a long, long time ago. I have my undergraduate degrees in civil engineering from the Israeli Institute of Technology. I actually have the diploma. And I worked as a civil engineer while I was studying, and then for about a year after I graduated. I didn't really like designing buildings. I liked managing the construction of buildings. I really enjoyed the process of building and seeing kind of what you're in charge of come together. And it was a beautiful thing. And I thought I would continue in that field, but my life did not take any kind of path that I would have predicted at any point. So it's always, who thought I'd be in Puerto Rico? Certainly not me. I never thought I'd end up in Puerto Rico. So there you go. You got to be flexible in life and ready to adjust to changing circumstances and changing value systems. As long as your primary values, your moral values don't change. All right, everybody. Thank you. Thanks to the panel. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the questions. Good questions. Thanks to all the super chatters. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. If you like, a lot of people disliked it, I think, because we came out against Trump, I think that was it, or maybe vaccines, or maybe it was the war, who knows. Somebody actually disliked the show before it even started. So people just don't like me. Justin asks, have you noticed that contemporary art seems to be downstream from politics? So yes, I wouldn't quite put it that way, because it's only downstream from politics in the sense that the left believes that the only purpose of art, the only reason to have art, is for the purpose of conveying political messages. So that today, pseudo art, what's called contemporary art, but it's not even art, it's political propaganda, is focused on politics because that's their agenda. Whereas art, the pseudo art of 50 years ago, was more individual expression of their metaphysical, epistemological, whatever, chaos within the mind of Kandinsky. That doesn't qualify anymore because it's not an expression of politics. So there really is a philosophical shift in terms of what they think it is. Shazbat says, I missed your super chat. No, I copied it, pasted it into a different section of my sheet to make sure that I review Measure of a Man, Star Trek: The Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 9. So it's on my list now permanently. So sorry I didn't acknowledge the fact that you submitted it. Thanks for doing it. All right. I guess we're $30 short of the $600 goal. So somebody should kick in $30 to make Ali, make sure that Ali sleeps well tonight. I'm sure somebody could do that. Justin got us a little closer with 10 Australian dollars. But yes, but real arts is not downstream of politics. It's downstream from philosophy. And real art ultimately shapes politics. So it's philosophy, culture, which includes art, politics, and then it's a reinforcing mechanism. Then it kind of, the politics and the culture reinforce each other. And of course the philosophy does as well. It's the stuff that's made today often is not art. And that's why they can get away with making it political. Any art that's explicitly political is not art, because it's not a reflection of the artist's metaphysical value judgment. It's a reflection of just thoughts in the movie Hang 'em High. I don't think I've seen the movie Hang 'em High. Is that like about about a lynch mob, and about the whole thing is around to lynch them or not to lynch the bad guys? I don't know. All right, guys. Thanks. Don't forget to like the show. If somebody wants to throw in $25 to get us to 600, that'd be great. If not, I will see you all. I don't know when I'll see you all. I'll try to do a show or two from Ocon. Not sure exactly when. It'll partially depend on my internet connection in my hotel room, partially depend on when I have break time during the conference itself to do it from the conference floor where they'll have good internet. Yeah, I'm thinking of the Oxbow incident. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Richard. That's right. Hey, I'll see many of you at Ocon. And those of you who are not coming, we'll miss you next year. Bye, guys. Have a great week. And those of you going to Ocon, have a great conference. Bye, everybody.